What's up, everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk Stories. I am one of your hosts, Jared, and I am here with my co-host and the rest of the team. You guys can
Hey
do your
there,
thing.
I'm Jaylan.
What's up, demons? It's me, your boy.
I need to get more creative with my greetings.
Charles laid it down. He laid down the challenge. All right. Well, today is a special day. We're very, very excited. I'm very, very excited anyway to talk about this particular film. But for the listeners, I have a question. Well, less of a question and more of a statement, I guess. If you have ever struggled to show your character's internal battles without relying on endless monologues, internal or otherwise, today's episode is for you because we are breaking down Creed, and we're going to explore how physical conflict can serve as a metaphor for internal struggle. And by the end, you'll know exactly how to make your character's fights mean something deeper. And if you want a deeper guidance, we help authors solve this exact problem, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on when we do more shameless plugs of our services. Anyway, so we also want you guys to stick around at the end because we're going to give you 3 key steps to mastering internal conflict through external fights. And we've also put together a Fight for the Soul Storyteller's Guide to Internal Conflict, which will be in the show notes. And of course, we have our wonderful Devil and Angels Advocate segment where I drive Charles mad by throwing out ridiculous things that I find hilarious. So we're gonna
tearing me apart, Lisa. I meant that GIF from earlier today. You're tearing me apart, Lisa.
I'm so sorry.
The people want blood. We need to give them blood.
Well,
yes.
The internet is a stupid place. The internet's a stupid place. Do not use that great quote.
I had to.
I wish we might just have to post a screenshot of the conversation that we had in our group chat completely in GIFs today based off of this.
Yes, yes, that's gonna be on our Substack. Anyway, so as we jump into this, let's talk a little bit about internal. I hate this internal conflict. I hate speaking today. I hate it.
It's too early.
The Internal Revenue.
I think they want to be called the Eternal Revenue Service. But anyway, so talking about the movie Creed. Creed is the 2015 movie that is in essence a spin-off of the Rocky boxing franchise. It was directed by one of my favorite directors, Ryan Coogler, who went on to direct. Actually, I think he directed it before that, if I recall correctly, but directed the Black Panther. And it's just a magnificent, magnificent director. And it explores legacy.
Much more attention, by the way.
He definitely does. I'm super excited. Side note, I'm super excited about his film Sinners, which comes out in a few months.
A day after
everybody knows I love vampires, and so it's a new vampire movie. Yes, that is true. So yeah, and it's about legacy. It's about struggling with identity. It is about all kinds of fun stuff, which makes it infinitely better than the original Rocky movies. I'm sorry that I had to take a shot. I had to take a shot.
Begins.
I'm sorry. It was a little early. It was a little early.
Wrong.
It was a little early. No, but seriously, it is still a fantastic film, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But the storytelling mechanic of the week that we are breaking down simply is physical conflict as a metaphor for eternal struggle. Now, my question to you guys about physical conflict. First question, I guess, is do you think that all physical conflict has to be fighting, per se?
No. There just has to be a push and a tug. It comes down to your characters wanting different things and how badly they want them. That's what creates conflict.
I've seen 1, 2, 3, 4. I've seen a lot of anime films where the physical conflict, the climax, is them just freaking running. Okay? So you can have it be running, it can be... Actually, here's a really old school reference. It's John Henry, right? Battling through the mountain. He's not actually punching anything. Well, okay, technically he's punching a mountain, but he's not fighting anyone specifically.
Right.
So it's not an act of violence. That's just off the top of my head, old school reference there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree that overall, the idea of the physical conflict is just a matter of what is. I mean, we all know that there are I believe it's the seven versions of conflict. And so any one of those can work. Off the top of my head, I can't think of them all, so I'm not going to try. But the ones that we know most often are man versus man, or man versus nature, and man versus society. Those are a few of them. And those are all forms of a physical conflict within themselves. And so using those as the metaphor for the internal struggle is just good storytelling, quite frankly. I think that one of the things that was really, really interesting about this film is that, here's the thing. Now, this is not to be, I'm trying to think of the word, but this is not to be intentionally contentious in any way, shape, or form. But when I do state that in some ways I do believe that the movies Creed, or the Creed series in general, is better than the Rocky films, I think that statement isn't necessarily objectively false, because of the fact that I believe that, and from the setting of where we are today, in today's society, and we've talked about this before, about when a story is told, and how sometimes the time that a story is told will change the way we see it, or its value to us as a society. And I think that when you objectively look at the Rocky films, there's a simplicity to, I guess it really depends on whether or not you like simplicity or you like complexity in your story. There is a major simplicity to the Rocky series that doesn't live in the Creed series. And if you prefer more complex, more down to earth, more realistic approaches to storytelling, in that sense, Creed feels like a far better film series than Rocky does. Also considering the fact that it felt like, while Rocky did have some internal struggle, it was nowhere near as realistic as Donny's struggles, in my opinion. But here's a question for you guys. What do you think is Adonis's most emotionally, out of all the fights that happen in this film, and knowing that fights are technically not the only way that the physical conflict is made in this film, but it's one of the biggest ones, and it's one of the metaphors that's used to deal with the stuff that Adonis is dealing with on the inside. Which one of his fights do you feel is the most emotionally charged, and why?
Are you talking like just the official fights in the ring?
Nope, all of them.
Okay, because I was going to say it was the argument that he had with his girlfriend when he lost his temper at her show, and she called him out on it.
Okay.
Yeah, that bit I think is true, but so I love all the Rocky movies, because for me they're all like Creed's continuation of them, so I love all of them. And I always, when I was going through the series before I watched the next one, I always rewatched the one before. So before I watched Creed 2, I rewatched this one, and the one thing I did notice, I mean, I've done this before, but when I did it back then, and I do it again now, it's what Jaylan said, is that fight in the concert. But the reason I think the concert fight is so specific is because it goes on Donnie's not major flaw, but the continuing flaw that happens in the series is his temper. But not temper in a he loses his cool easily. It's not that. There's this bubbling anger that constantly gets in his way. So Rocky had this constant whisper of self-doubt that was always getting the better of him. He always struggled with. And with Donnie, it's the same thing of his anger, but not anger as in not getting his way, but the anger that he can't fix things and they're just there and festering. So that's why that the one jerky comment goes south so fast, because and plus also by then he also knows that Rocky's sick by that point too. So again, it's that sense he can't control that the sickness. He can't wipe it away, which detail I always thought was really brilliant about Creed, that they did what they did with Rocky of giving him this consistent flaw that he has to keep going. And I think the beauty of this whole series, because by the way, I think this is like the best film series ever, ever, because there's not a bad one. Yeah, I know everyone's going to say Rocky 5, Rocky 4. They're wrong. They're wrong.
It's terrible.
Okay, Rocky 5's not terrible. Moving on. Are they flawed? The Rocky 4 and 5 are flawed. That is true. But they're not bad. There's not like a bad movie, and there's a lot of credit to each of them. But in any case, my point being, though, is that it continue. The reason why I feel that way is because every one of them has that very real, internal, persistent, intrusive thought to each character. And the way they evolved that with Donny, I thought was brilliant. Because I remember thinking, well, you can't do the classic story of a guy constantly struggling with feeling he's a loser in its various forms. And here they gave him anger. And the anger is not just, again, it's not getting his way. It's not being able to fix things, not being able to wipe away the past, not being able to, punch that guy out at the concert and shut him up, because you can't shut him up. And this Jaylon gets developed brilliantly in the second one, too, and gets developed even better in Creed 3, which is amazing.
Well,
I don't know which of the three Creed movies are great, but I love 3, too.
I'm kind of impressed that even without watching the rest of the Creed movies or the previous Rocky movies, I still was able to pick out that fight was very significant. At least I know that I'm paying attention to the right things.
To me, I would even argue, I agree with that. I agree that was definitely one of the a very emotionally charged fight. I think another one is the very first fight in the film. And I don't mean the one in the ring. I mean when we first meet Adonis and he's fighting. He literally bursts into our world violently.
That is such a good opening, by the way.
And it's we set it up right from the beginning that he is fighting a legacy, he is fighting identity, he is fighting everything that he is terrified of accepting right from the very moment we meet him. And it's such a powerful moment, and it sets the tone for just like what Charles was talking about, as the central flaw of this character from that we see him deal with throughout all of the movies. And we see it right from the beginning. It's the first thing that we've done, and that brings me to a point of when telling stories, what we should think a little bit more about is introducing our characters in a way that introduces their struggles immediately to the audience. I should know, not just, we always hear like, oh, we should know what the character wants, and we should know what the character is after, like immediately or as early on as we can possibly do. And I agree with that to an extent, but I think even before that, I think knowing who this person is, knowing what they struggle with, gets us engaged in the person or invested in that character from the start. And then it makes knowing what they want actually matter, as opposed to, like, oh, so-and-so wants to get the, the map for the, who wants to get the Declaration of Independence for whatever reason, which is awesome movie.
But why?
Exactly. But why should I care that that's what he wants? Why should I care that he wants it? Why should I care that he wants to get it? And I think introducing exactly what they're struggling with is gold. And I think that this movie did it fantastically. And then not only did it do that, but it continuously reinforced that internal struggle. The other thing about Adonis is that not only does he deal with this temper, but he also deals with this, I don't want to say arrogance, but in a way it's this, I would say pride. It's almost like this pride that it's a kind of a toxic pride that just kind of gets in the way of everything that he does. And it's kind of the flaw that gets in the way of every single fight that he ultimately has, until the last fight that he has with Conlon, where that's less of, once he embraces who he is and it's like, this is me, then it becomes that pride doesn't disappear, it just becomes a different kind of pride. It's less toxic. So I think that was
the pride can become a strength rather than a weakness.
Right, exactly. So we've kind of turned his weakness into a strength by the end, which is really just great character development and great storytelling. But how do you think the physical conflict, how do you think not just in this story but in general, how do you think physical conflict enhances character arcs compared to dialogue per se?
Well, I would say every metaphor is powerful. That's why it is such a necessary ingredient for good storytelling, because when you can connect a visual with a concept, with words that you hear, that helps it get inside your audience a little bit more. because they see more ways that they can relate to this character based on their own experience in life. It's connecting more brain neurons, basically, if you want to get like really technical about it. But I think metaphor in general is just really powerful because of that. And when you have something as primal as fighting, like hand-to-hand fighting, we all have experienced in our lives wanting to take the solution to a problem in our hands and fix it ourselves. And so it's something that even if you are not a professional fighter, even if you have no propensity for violence or throwing a punch whatsoever, you can still relate to that feeling. And so seeing it so clearly helps you connect up the feelings in a very powerful way. That's my perspective from someone who, I took karate at one point, and so I have an appreciation for the art of fighting, but I still have no propensity for it.
I did not know you were a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle type kid, so I respect that.
I am not.
I respect that. I should have said Karate Kid. Oh, that was dumb of me. Sorry.
It was a hobby.
But for one thing, dialogue asterisk is boring. Asterisk, not always, of course. That's not true, but bear with me here. In certain cases, dialogue can be boring because it literally is just people talking, which of course can be thrilling and brilliant, and yada yada. We all know that. But in this case, something I always thought was really interesting is that with Rocky, I always, it's not, beforehand I was like, so they're boxing movies, right? Yeah, they box, whatever. But it's not about boxing. But it is about boxing. Like, what are you talking about? Because the core of these movies, it's not about boxing. Boxing is the metaphor of the challenge, but the internal struggles. But the reason why it works is because it's one of the things. So with Donny, right, the thing is that you can be angry at yourself and angry at the world, but you can put it into a physical mode of something to do. But it's like, okay, so he fights in a ring. How is it going to help his problems? Because if you can endure the training, and something I think is really brilliant about Creed is that the training actually goes on throughout it, because that was something I adore this series so much, but the whole single montage thing doesn't really work. It's fine, but it doesn't. If you want to get more technical, this is something I was really glad that Creed had. I think it does through all three of them anyway.
Mm-hmm,
that was something I think does really well here. Okay, yeah. Is that if you can endure the training and endure the brutality of a boxing fight, then you can tackle the stuff inside you. Not because everything is do boxing, but that sense of action. It's not because, anyone who's lived inside their head for long enough, it's just a storm. It's a storm that goes on and on and on and on and on. But if you can put it to action, exercise, cleaning your house, doing a project, training, some kind of physical, tangible goal, suddenly a lot of the elements in your head take a more malleable form that you can stop. So what I always thought was really brilliant about the series is that the physical metaphors are one of those things of prove it, prove yourself, walk the walk. But also, if you can, what boxing is, everything Donnie goes in this movie, the training, the fights, is basically what's going on in his head. And that's, I think, what Rocky's, especially from what he's experienced, trying to get him to understand. And once he can achieve that, then he can achieve what's inside him. Hence the whole thing with the shadow boxing, where I love that bit where he's facing the mirror. He goes, this guy right here is your worst enemy. There you go. Because physically, that's what the boxing match is, but it's also internally. And once you combine those two, so going back to like karate, martial arts, kind of spirituality stuff, it is the physical and the mental. So it's interesting in the sense is like the whole Rocky Creed series, you could argue was almost like a distant cousin of martial arts movies and stuff like that, because it has that same kind of ness combo.
Yes,
I agree with that. I think that's an interesting. Statement. I mean, I would go one step further and even say you're right. I think it's not even a distant cousin from the martial arts films. I would say that it qualifies within itself as a martial arts film, all within its own. On top of that, when you think about not just this film and not just the Rocky films, which are all fantastic, both franchises are fantastic. But then outside of that, even outside of them, like Southpaw and the movie Ali, which I know is more of a biopic, but it's still a boxing movie, and it's a fantastic boxing movie, by the way, as well as $1 Million Baby. These are all films where you have. I used to think the same thing that Charles thought at one time, where it was like, okay, it's a It's a boxing movie. It's about, people fighting. Cool. Same thing as most martial arts movies. You think, oh, it's one of my favorite martial arts franchises of all time, IP Man, is. I used to always think, oh, this is just it's fighting. It's really cool. People getting their ass kicked, kind of thing, and that's really awesome. But then when you really start to think about it, it's like, oh no, these main characters are all truly struggling with stuff, whether it be struggling with something deep within themselves or struggling with something, the society that's surrounding them, like Ali, which is a lot more about society that he was going up against than it was just about himself. IP Man is another one. It's about the change of the country that he was living in the time that he was living in trying to maintain the identity that he had and who he was and what he stood for and what he was trying to bring to his people. But all the while, he's beating people's asses the entire time, and it was like, okay, like I get that he's not just fighting people; he's fighting society, he's fighting political stances, he's fighting, and I think that's really, really, really cool. And I think they do that same thing with Creed. Of this is not just a guy who's beating up people and becoming a champion. The other thing I'll say about Creed that I do notice, and it's not even a bad thing; it's just the realization is when you really look at the framework for how Creed is, and then how the Rocky films are. They are, in essence, just copies of the Rocky movie with just slight changes to them. But the stories are generally the same, especially Creed and Rocky 1. They're, I wouldn't say one-for-one remakes, but they are definitely very closely related to how the formula of how they're written and how they're designed. And it's not at all a bad thing. It's a system that works. The Rocky
What's
1
the key
movie
difference between them?
Well, there's a few different key differences, I think.
I was going to say it's Rocky Balboa and Adonis Creed. That's what makes them so different.
Right. Which, in the way that they handle things, the way that they deal with things, the characters themselves, I think you're right. They are so drastically different that it is interesting. And you can do that. That's a great example. I think that's a great lesson for our listeners too, of like, you can take inspiration from something, and you can even use the formula of something else, but add your own flavor to it and make something that is head and shoulders either above or just stands on its own with something that's already existing. And I think that's really great. Not to mention that I think that the Rocky 1 is a fucking phenomenal fucking movie. I love that movie.
Life, bro.
I love that movie so much. And the weird thing is, when I was a kid, I didn't like it because I didn't. Maybe I just didn't get it. But as I've gotten older, and the more I've seen it, and I've seen that movie like 40 times. And the more I've seen it, I've just been like, oh, this movie is so freaking good. But it's just like, I don't know. I adore it. I adore it. And so I wonder what other movies that you guys have seen or stories that you guys have read that have had physical conflict that have effectively been used as metaphors. And what do you think is the number one lesson that you could pull from it that you could share here?
I feel like I haven't watched so many movies. The only other movie about boxing or martial arts that I can think of off the top of my head that I was obsessed with as a child was Disney's Jump In with Keke Palmer and Corbin Bleu. Oh my goodness.
I was just thinking about this movie last night.
I watched Creed and I was like, need this movie back in my life. I need to go on another like jump in kick just watching it like every couple weeks.
You need to wait for it. Push it to the limit. Okay. Dude, when
perfect.
Yes.
All the kids on my playground were suddenly playing jump rope and annoyed the piss out of me. Well, mostly because I hated those kids. But
the way I made all of my friends in my neighborhood turn the ropes for me while I failed to jump in for like a year, all of them were mad at me. They're like, I can do this in my sleep now. Will you quit it? You're not going to be able to do this.
I haven't even thought of that song in like 20 years. I don't know.
That must be, I swear that must be like a generational thing that we've all done. Because like, remember, I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Brink.
I didn't see that one.
But when Brink came out, it was a Disney movie. And like the way Charles was talking about, like people were like double dutching and stuff. Like everybody was trying to do that. When Brink came out, everybody wanted to be a rollerblader after that.
I remember that one.
And it was just like, and then when Johnny Tsunami came out, all I knew everybody was always like, I want to be a surfer, and it was just like a thing. I was like, so it's just funny. It's funny to me how like films and stuff like that can influence our behavior.
For sure.
Disney movies and stuff.
For sure. But anyway, that movie very much was, as a child especially, watching a movie like that, that showed the internal struggle of wanting to find your own place in life, but feeling the pressure of having to fit inside the box that others make for you. That's a very powerful message to hear in a story like that when you're young and going through the same thing. And I was also going to say, most of the stories that I've read, or most of the stories that I've experienced that have to do with martial arts, were in book form. So I read a lot of samurai books. And one of them I want to say it was Eye of the Samurai. I have to look it up. But that book series was The Blue-Eyed Samurai. Sorry. But that was another one about identity, where this American, or I forget if he was American or European, he was shipwrecked and ended up being taken in by a samurai group in Japan. Just that very interesting dynamic of learning to embrace a new identity because that's all he had. His world was completely flipped upside down. He was inserted into another world. So those are the stories that I can remember having to do with martial arts that showed a very physical plot and how it represented internal struggles. Because even in a physical plot, your arc in your plot isn't just based on the events. It's not just you have to train to win the fight, you win the fight, resolution. There's a character arc that these events just push the character along.
So before I want to make sure I have this right, Jared, could you repeat your question? Because I want to make sure. Those are great points, by the way, Jalon.
Which other movies use physical conflict effectively as a metaphor, and what's one lesson that you could share that you've learned from it?
Okay, yeah, okay. So this is a weird thing, but, and I kind of, well, no, never mind. But something that I'm going to have to back up here to get to this one point. So there's an episode, if I'm remembering correctly, in the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh cartoon, right? Where there's Piglet, right? So everyone knows about Piglet. What's Piglet's whole thing? He's scared easily, right?
Anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety. Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of episodes, right, where he has to go and face something that he's terrified of. Like, poor Piglet. Everyone's like, yeah, go send the little Piglet to go fight something terrible, right? And one was horrifying to me as a child. I loved it, but it was horrifying. And it wasn't the under the bed episode. It was, he has a shadow, right? Piglet has a shadow, and like his shadow goes missing or something, and he has to go like fight terrifying shadows of scary trees. Okay, this was terrifying to me as a little kid. I loved it, but it terrified me like so much. And Piglet has to stand up against these shadows. He can't just run away, because if he doesn't do anything, his shadow's going to get in trouble, so he has to go face these monsters, right? And everything turns out okay, because that's a great cartoon, by the way. This is funny because the movie that pops in my brain, because I'm trying to think of like, what is something that doesn't have violence? And I know I'm kind of tiptoeing the line here with this example, but Aliens is an unofficial Winnie the Pooh movie. To hear me out, because what Ripley goes through in that movie is basically an arc of Piglet from the Winnie the Pooh stories. She's absolutely traumatized by what happened in Alien. Now she has to go back into this hellhole, and at the end of the story, she has to go and face the alien queen, the worst of the worst, in the hive, because if she doesn't, she loses her kid. Well, not her kid, but the kid, Newt, right? It's this terrifying thing because she has to do it alone. She only has a bunch of weapons herself, but she's terrified to do it, but she has to face it. And then when she does face it, she does it bravely, terrified, but bravely, and she succeeds. Not because she gets lucky, but because she knows it doesn't matter what she's afraid of, she has to save this kid. And when I saw Aliens the first time, I was like, that's a lot like Piglet. And it's funny. But what I think is interesting is that something that's really meaningful as a little kid, right? When you're a little kid, you're watching Piglet going, oh, he can face his fears by standing up to them. And then when you're an adult, you go, oh, Ripley can face her fears by standing up to them. it's an interesting thread. There's certain great things keep on going, and the lesson from that I find brilliant is that you can actually face your fears. You know, you might have to suit up like Ripley and get a bunch of grenades and flamethrowers and be a total boss, but you can do it, and it is terrifying. Because what Ripley finds down there in the Alien Queen is like the worst thing imaginable. But you can succeed. And the other thing, the reason I bring this up is that it's interesting that it's a lot like Creed and Rocky. Same thing. What they are dealing with feels insurmountable. What Donny has inherited cannot be stopped.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You can face your fear and you can actually succeed. Not facing your fear does not automatically mean success, and vice versa, but you have a better chance if you face your fears. And I think it's interesting that that's what Donnie does, that's what Rocky does, that's what Piglet does, and that's what Ripley does, because those are three great series. I just love a lot of stuff, guys. There you go.
Nice.
You haven't picked this up, audience. I love a lot of stuff.
I always
I
learn
love-
something very interesting and meaningful from all the things that you love. So I appreciate you sharing it with us.
I love that line. I love that last part though, Charles. I just love a lot of stuff. I love that because I feel that so much. Yeah, I love that. That was actually, I love that little rabbit hole we went down there, because I learned a lot from that too. It also made me think that really any good story, that's really what it's about, right? Like it's really about your main character facing whatever it is they are afraid of, and what they're afraid of it's not always like Piglet, for instance, where it's like I'm blatantly terrified of this thing. Sometimes the main character doesn't even know that they're terrified of it. They're just actively trying to avoid it. But it's like it's all that. And when you start thinking about like the hero's journey or things like that, it's my whole thought process of like, I truly believe that the hero's journey is nothing more than just a reflection of the human experience. Because when you really think about it, we all do. Like, if you watch any movie and you look at your own life, you'll notice that the journey that a protagonist goes on is not much different than the journey we go on in any scenario that we deal with. From we get a goal, we have a thing that we struggle with. And some of us are like franchises, and we have this thing that we struggle with for years and years and years on end. Nonetheless, we have these things that we want, and then we go in to pursue those things, and we come up against obstacles. And most of the time, we're terrified of if we do succeed at it or if we don't succeed at it. Either way, we're scared out of our mind of that. And sometimes we run away, and then some random old guy with a beard comes in and tells us about, like, metaphorically speaking, but pushes us back, towards where we need to go. And in the end, we either achieve what we don't or we don't. And we have a tragic moment or we have a great happy ending. And then it's on to the next part of our life. And then the same cycle happens. And that story circle I think it exists because it is taken from us. I think that Joseph Campbell tried to make it as like this big mythological thing of like, oh, this is what we learn from myths. But I think it's really just human beings were just trying to tell, this is what we do. This is how we function. And then I think that just kind of bled into, that's what mythology is, right? It's just the exaggerated retellings of things that have actually happened in some way, shape, or form. And so I don't know. I find that funny. I've always found that interesting, that parallel between the hero's journey and the human experience. And then when you watch a movie, I think that's why those stories resonate so much with us, because we all understand. We inherently understand it, even if you've never been in a boxing match, even if you've, never been poor, or you've never been rich, or you've never had tons of women, or you've never, whatever, even if you've never fought a dragon. We all
about me.
Like, whatever it is, we all inherently understand the idea of wanting something, needing to go get it, struggling with something, being afraid of trying to get it. We all understand that, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think Adonis is such an interesting character. Specifically, I think it's why he resonates with me so much, is because I understand that. I understand the fear of being in your shadow and having that anger and those unresolved feelings towards your parental figures, and how to kind of deal with that, and that pride. I understand that. I understand that more than I care to admit. I do understand it. So it resonates with me a lot.
I do want to just acknowledge you really touched there, Jared, on why stories are so powerful. Because it's the language that as humans we're all wired to speak. And I mean, as early as myths, people were telling stories to help them make sense of their human experience. And so that's why stories are still so powerful today. If you feel like they, even if you say fairy tales have no bearing on my life, like I'm too old for fairy tales, whatever. No, stories are still the language that your soul connects with. And that's why they are so powerful. That's why we need to learn how to tell stories well.
I think that also answers the question about why emotional physical conflict enhances character arcs compared to dialogue, because I think that on that level of even more than words, even more than language, you could speak Spanish, you could speak French, you could speak Russian, but the one thing that we all understand is action. We all understand the things that people do, the things that people go through. I can watch a really good Korean film or Japanese film and not have the subtitles at all, but the performances and the things that are happening make me clearly understand what's happening, and that's purely from the action. Those are things that are understood because we understand story I think we all understand story on a almost molecular level.
Yeah.
And I think that it's one of the reasons why I love stories, periods. One of the reasons why I love movies so much. And Charles has had to listen to me gush about why exactly I love movies so much. But this is exactly the reason why I love stories so much. Here's a question, and this, again, not meant to be contentious, but I am genuinely, I guess the only person, never mind, I'm not even going to ask this because technically the only person who can answer this question is Charles, and I feel like I already know what your answer is going to be.
What's the
But
question?
the question is,
Come on.
does Creed nail this particular mechanic better than its predecessor?
Which mechanic exactly?
The physical conflict as a metaphor for internal struggle.
I feel like honestly they're the same. I don't really feel one is better than the other. I think they both tackle the different forms really, really well. Because here's what's interesting is that, remember, what's really powerful is that Rocky, like, I'm trying to do this simplistically. The thing that really struck me, I'll try to frame this well. The thing that really struck me is with Rocky, one of the reasons that movie really clicked in my head and saved my life is that if you remember, he's already dating Adrian so he has the love of his life right there when he gets news he's going to fight Apollo, right? And they give him this check, right? This wonderful check. So literally, if that was all Rocky's problem, he wins. He has Adrian, and he's going to get a buttload of money. It's the same money he has when he gets into Rocky 2, right? And he feels like crap because he doesn't feel about himself. So like half of the movie is getting to that point. The other half is dealing with that fallout. And that leads into the whole him going to the ring the night before the fight, and the guy goes, "I'm sure you'll give us a good show," right? That whole thing. So it totally fits for him. There's stuff that this movie does. Donnie's losing his car in the fight in the very beginning, talking with his mom, the conversations with his mom, stuff with Bianca, and all that stuff. They go through a different format, all these different relationships that he goes through. The fact that he has a preliminary fight. So there's no preliminary fight in Rocky. I don't think it really needs one, but this one does because it's a different kind of conversation. Side note, by the way, the preliminary fight, that tracking shot behind him, so much, so good. So honestly, I don't really feel one did better or the other because I think they just did it really bloody excellent because they're different characters, different things. So something I think is really interesting is, like, I'll tell you straight up what I find fascinating is Rocky's struggle to see himself as not a loser, which is presented perfectly by Adrian in that movie. Honestly, I give Rocky a lot of credit in that first movie, but oh my holy God, in the first Rocky, where she's screaming at her brother, I'm not a loser, that thing made me cry when I saw that. Like, I cried because it was perfect. That's something I really, really relate to hardcore. And that's why Rocky is so important to me. But Donnie, on the other hand, what I find fascinating about him is technically his story is over at the beginning because he's rescued by his adopted mom. And so you're like, yo, what's your problem, Donnie? But that's what makes him great. because it's not about the money. It's about everything all up in here and him still feeling like that unwanted bastard. And that hits me really hard. That it doesn't matter how financially or otherworldly you get, there's still something in you that tells you you're not worth it, you're not there, you're not a person, and that continual struggle, which again is developed perfectly in the sequels too. So that's why I'm going to say, and I'm sorry that I ramble so much. I'm trying. I just love Rocky so much. I'm telling you.
It's all good. It's all
A
good.
round of applause for you, Charles, because that is a beautiful way of explaining why character arcs are so much more profound than just plot structure.
Yeah,
I agree.
And so
with
I think they do them both equally well, to be completely honest, because I think they really understand their characters and what they need to go through to get where they need
I
to go.
also think this movie is filled with metaphors in general. One of which you touched on with the whole Donny losing his car at the beginning of the movie, or early on in the movie. And I think that and this is something I think that you as a writer, as writers, can do, is creating and assigning meaning to objects and things and letting those be symbolic to deeper meanings. That car is the last thing, the only thing that Donnie has that is his connection to his dad, besides his, adopted mother. That is the only physical thing that he has. When his whole, ironically enough, he would think that he has all this anger towards his dad, and you would think he'd be like, he has all this money, right? He's got his dad's money, he's inherited that, he could buy his own car, and you would think he would never touch it. I don't want to have anything to do with this thing, but he still drives it, and to him, it's considered a prized possession. And in that moment where he loses it while he's working so hard to fight to prove I'm not my father. That first fight against what's his name? The dude that beats his ass. That knocks him out. Yeah. That whole fight is just the first dude he knocks out and then he gets knocked out himself is all just to prove I'm not Apollo Creed. I'm my own man. I'm my own. And then losing that fight, he loses the one connection that he has to the very person he's trying to fight so hard to not be. And then not only that, but he actually wants that car back. Which is kind of, it's just kind of interesting. I just find it as an interesting metaphor of connection to the very legacy that he so desperately wanted to get away from, yet he literally drove around in it. And so I don't know. This is something that you, as a writer, I think, can do, of assigning meaning to your to different objects, to different things, even giving different characters, and using them as a metaphor for progress within a character's arc. Fascinating stuff. But here's a question: what do you think the hardest part? What's the hardest part of writing fight scenes that convey emotion, and how do you suggest one overcomes this?
Cool.
Choreography, believability, getting out of corners that you already wrote yourself into, having it actually mean something than just being swish swish stab, and that's brilliant too, because honestly all the Rocky Creed fights, they're all different, all the choreography's different, all the reasons for fighting are different, all the attitudes are different. So that's really tricky, but I think in a nutshell, I think you have to basically go back to dialogue and know that each punch, each block, each event is a part of the character development. So it's not really about winning, it's about how he gets punched down and gets back up. So it's interesting in that sense, like we'll take that for example. There's these great moments of just in this final fight for this one of Donny getting his butt handed to him. But I personally feel that when I watch these movies, you don't wince because, oh, it's really bloody and he got hit. There's an internal conflict, which is if he loses this fight, then this happens. Or if he doesn't succeed something, then this happens. So each punch becomes, oh no, he's getting taxed. He's getting more knocked down. So for example, kind of like basically mechanically speaking, you're taking like a Naruto, every time they do a jujitsu, their chakra's getting used up, right? So they only have a limited time to do something. You take that mechanic, put it in the fight, but you have it emotionally speaking, if they're using energy, they only have so much left to get what they want. So it's like a tap dance, I guess, between a suspense thriller and theater drama, if that makes sense. Otherwise, that's a tough conversation.
It is really tough. I'm gonna let you take most of this one because I feel like you have way more experience writing scenes like this. I have a lot of experience editing them, and so I can tell you some of the biggest mistakes, which I did appreciate in doing the line edits for Jared's debut novel. In the fights that happen, there's a young character who doesn't have a lot of experience is not going to fight well against an older character who is stronger and has more experience. It's very tempting to let your protagonist win too easily. You can't let your hero win too easily because in real life, it's not easy to win. So people aren't going to connect to your protagonist and feel like they can see themselves in that character if they don't have to lose anything in order to win the fight.
Also, throw out there too, because you said something that clicked in my head. Understand too, we're going to borrow a little bit from Harlan Ellison, the writer here. Violence is violent. Okay. And here's the thing too. You don't, so everyone goes, oh, that means we have to show blood and guts. No. Example being, by the way, the Lord of the Rings films, especially the last one, they're PG-13, but especially that last one, my God, some of the violence in those movies gets really bad without being blood and guts. It's about the emotion. Something you said about young characters. I remember I was 13. I want to say it was 13. And I was reading the last book in this trilogy. I'm not going to mention it because I don't want the poor book and author to get pummeled. But I wasn't really a fan of the third book. But I remember there's this battle coming up. And I'll never forget, there was this part where this teenage girl who had never been in a fight, not really, never had combat experience or anything. And the line was like, she pulled out a dagger. And I remember going, you've never fought before in your life. You have no idea. But she's the girl, so she gets a dagger. It's like, take that Narnia thing for Lucy getting a dagger out of here. That's ridiculous. But the reason I bring it up is not a sense of jerkiness, but violence, like real combat. You get hurt, bad things happen. And the fact that I have a dagger and I can do good. Horse malarkey. Unless you're doing a little fun, pulpy adventure story, that's fine. But if you're trying to be realistic, it doesn't work because you're not respecting the violence inherent in a fight. Like, for example, what's great, another tool that kind of popped up is Empire Strikes Back between Luke and Vader. That has a wonderful character. There's a wonderful arc there. But what's really good about that is the whole point of that fight is that Luke thinks he's top dog. And Vader goes, no, right? But he's punished by losing his hand. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, oh no, I got beat and I ran away. You're playing with swords. You'll lose your hand. Even George Lucas at one point said that words, what's with all the chopped limbs? Well, when you're playing with swords, there's your metaphorical punishment trying to be an adult. So it ties in with that. Violence is really important. So in this case with Creed, Donny has to get knocked down to the mat. He has to suffer because you're in the violent realm and you don't get out of a fight without scratches. And if you do, understand why. Give us a good reason as to why.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think for me,
Dragon Ball, everyone. Go watch or read Dragon Ball. There you go.
I think for me, the hardest part about writing fight scenes and balancing it with the emotion, the hardest thing that happens is the blow by blow description. I struggle with that a lot, and I have struggled with that a lot. Of when you're writing a screenplay, for instance, even in that you have to kind of gloss over exactly what happened because you kind of leave it to the coordinators to choreograph exactly what's going to happen. In a book, you don't have a choreographer to organize the fight, and so you have to kind of paint a picture in somebody's head as to what's happening. But at the same time, nobody wants to read Joe punches Bob in the face and Bob falls on the ground and Bob gets back up and Bob kicks him in the stomach. Nobody wants to read that. But it gets really hard to not do that and still paint the picture. And so one of the greatest things that I have found is to really ground, if you're going to have conflict, a physical altercation of some kind in your story, root it in an emotional moment first. and then surround all that conflict around that. Because then you have moments for dialogue. You have moments for internal monologues of like thoughts that happen. Because if I'm going to fight my brother and we're going to fight, and we've gotten to the point where we're actually going to have a real fight and a fight to the death, there's going to be some thoughts that I have about this. There's going to be some words exchanged about this. There's, and you know, of course, you want to also throw in some of the environmental stuff that's going on. What set the scene? And I think that's hard. It's hard to do going into it. I think the best advice I can provide is in that kind of space is in your first draft, do blow by blow. Just do the blow by blow. Get that all in your head so you know exactly where everybody is and what's happening. And then when you go back in, just cut it out. Cut out only keeping what's most impactful, and then replace the stuff that you take out with something more sensory or environmental, and then kind of build around that. And then you have a much better fight scene. But don't stress it. Don't stress it on your first stab at it, because it's okay. It's okay. That's going to be crazy.
So I would add to that as an example. You can say the brother kicks the other brother in the chest, right? Around the chest. Instead of going, he kicked him in the chest, you say the tip of his foot hit his ribs, and he could feel it come all the way up his bones and into his chest.
Yeah.
His own chest, his own heart. And that felt good, that he could feel the crack because he was so angry and wanted to make him brittle. There you go.
Exactly. Another suggestion too is this book right here, Writing Fight Scenes by Rain Hall. This book right here, it has a very specific system on how to break down a fight scene from beginning to end. And technically, if you don't want to read the whole book, you don't really need to. It's like the first 5 chapters get you what you need. The rest is just breaking down, you know, how to write guns and blades and things like that realistically. If you don't care about all that, don't worry about that. But how to write a fight scene, many of the fight scenes that I've written, I did once I started reading that, I was like, okay, now I have a better idea of how a fight scene should be played out. So check that one out. I don't have a link for you on that, but you know, rewind and you'll hear what I said. Yeah, you could search for it, no problem.
Thrift Books is awesome.
Yes, Rain Hall's not paying us for commission. Yes, Rain Hall's not paying us for commission, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna give you a link. But yeah, all that being said, I would say that we specifically help authors make sure that their fight scenes are not just punches and kicks, but reflections of a deeper emotional truth. So if you need help with that, take a look at our free consult link, which is in our show notes, where we go over that. And we can try to see if we can get your fight scene up to snuff. All that being said, guys, as we roll along, let's get to the main event. And no pun intended, let's get ready to rumble.
And in the red corner we have, and in the blue corner we have.
It's perfect. Listen, when we have far more means and resources, we will have cool things like an editor come in and do like a random thing where like we cut away to like an ESPN fight night thing, and it's one of us and the other one. But in the meantime, we're gonna have to ask you writers out there to use your imaginations and just imagine that's what just happened in the last segment. But the question that we have today, this is the hot take question: is Adonis actually a better character than Rocky? Charles will be obviously telling me that I am completely wrong, and I, who've taken notes, will talk about, will argue for this to be the case. Charles, would you like to open the floor for this, or would you like me to go?
I think you need to go because Charles opened it up last time, and I still feel bad for that.
Okay.
Just start.
Okay. So the notes that I've taken, keep in mind, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna go. Adonis isn't just fighting for a title. He's fighting the shadow of his father. He never knew. These are why I think that he is better than Rocky. 1, the internal complexity. Adonis is not just fighting for a title. He's fighting the shadow of his father he never knew, and the privilege that haunts him. His journey is a constant battle between proving he's not just Apollo's son and figuring out who he really is. Yeah, so that's the first. His internal complexity. He's more internally complex than Rocky is. Emotional vulnerability. We see Adonis break down questions his worth, his open struggles with love, fear, and loss. He's emotionally raw in ways that makes him feel more real and relatable, and his relationship with Bianca also adds a layer to his character that Rocky's story didn't explore as deeply, though it did explore it with Adrian. it was not as deep as it was with Bianca. And then, of course, modern resonance. Adonis's journey hits harder in today's world where many people wrestle with identity, imposter syndrome, and the pressure to live up to expectations, while Rocky's story is timeless, but Adonis's struggle feels more urgent and relatable to the contemporary audience. Those are my arguments why I think that Adonis is a better character than Rocky in the year 2025, in the year of our Lord, 2025. And now I turn the floor over to Charles.
Just want to say once again, I am doing this under protest, and I hate this. There is no competition. They're two different characters, and they're both wonderful. So I hate this, but I need money, and he's the boss, so I have to do what he has to do. So I just like this to be an example of capitalism's horror at its finest.
Metaphor.
So that being said, I guess Rocky's a better character because everything that Jared just said is not really all that original because Rocky had already done it. Gosh dang it. Anyway, and Rocky facing himself being a loser is just as universal, if not more universal, than imposter syndrome. I hate this. And and the fact of Rocky he lives in a crummy apartment, no one likes him, and he's in a crummy neighborhood, and he's trying to make it through, and he can't get anything, and he works as a loan shark, a job he doesn't want to do, like the one I'm doing right this very second. That, is a universal struggle too, more than Adonis, because I hate this, because he still has money, and Donny's never going to have to struggle with money ever again, and none of us can relate to that. I hate this. And also, Adrian and him are the lost souls that need redemption from their own selves of what they've done, which is more powerful than the meet cute of Bianca and Donny. And Rocky's not fighting to get a title, he's fighting to prove that there is more to him, which is beautifully and wonderfully said in the original, versus Donny has his daddy issues for a father he didn't really know, which is kind of unrelatable because how many of us relate to that? I'm sorry,
We need to stop traumatizing Charles.
So sorry. I'm so sorry, but I love this. I love it. So, Jaylon can be the decider.
Listeners, I thought this was supposed to be an educational program.
Yeah, I know. And now they have been educated on differences of opinion.
Okay, well, if I have to be the judge, I do like the perspective. I will say, just for the record, I agree with the perspective that a character can be different, a story can be different, and not better or worse than another. So for the record, that is the correct opinion. I have to say, just for the capitalistic metaphor, Charles wins.
So not fair. I was robbed. I
win and I feel nothing. So it's like it's what Rocky IV should have been.
So, or at least fair enough. I will not disagree. Once the judge has spoken, the judge has spoken. However, for those that are not, just in case you weren't clear, I think that this was a perfect example that after we just discussed how to write a fight scene and balance emotion, that the very next segment was a moment where two people had opinions, where one was just like, I don't want to do this, and the other one is just like, I want to do this, and it's just like, and the emotional tone. So yeah, see, there was a lesson to be learned even within this madness. I'm not just an evil taskmaster. There's a method to my madness.
Yes.
Personally, though, I do enjoy doing this to you guys. To both of you, actually, it is very fun.
I am not participating in whatever this is next time. I refuse.
Charles is gonna ask for a raise.
He's in protest of this. I promise that the next one will be far worse. I mean, far better than this one, is what I meant. I promise.
Listeners out there, if you want to save us from these segments, donate to save our souls.
Yes. You have to actively root for this segment to be destroyed for it to end. So, engage for Charles's soul.
Send help.
So send help.
I
Okay.
tolerate no nonsense, to quote the soundtrack.
I broke no bullshit. I'm sorry, but God, you
I
guys
didn't even
gotta
get to
watch
talk
Billions.
about the soundtrack or the music of this movie. Oh my lord.
Yes, we're not going to talk about it, but it is great. She's not wrong. Okay, so the 3 takeaways. I want you guys to. We did promise that you guys would be able to walk away with 3 steps to mastering internal conflict through external fights, and I am going to deliver. So your first step is going to be establish the internal. Eternal. I don't know.
They're both. We established that internal struggles are eternal.
Yes, unfortunately, establish the internal.
It's like
Establish the internal struggle first. Make sure your character's internal conflict is clear before introducing physical confrontation. An example of this is in Creed. Adonis' fear of living in his father's shadow is established before his first fight, making every single punch a challenge to that very fear. Number 2, tie every fight to an emotional beat. Each physical fight should reflect a specific emotional state, growth, or setback for the character. The example for this is in Adonis' fight with Leo the lion. It highlights his anger and need to prove himself, while the final fight with Conlon showcases his acceptance of exactly who he is. Tying those things together is chef's kiss. Third and final step, use action to show change. We talked about this. Character arcs. Let the outcomes of the physical confrontations mirror the character's internal development or regression. For example, Adonis standing tall after the final bell rings isn't about winning. It's about the internal victory over self-doubt and finding his own identity. Those are the 3 steps you want to take. So once again, establish your internal struggle first. Let us see it from the beginning, as early on as you can. Make sure every fight is tied to an emotional beat, making sure that it's tied into those internal struggles we've talked about and those emotional moments that are happening. And then use the action to show change. Help us see how what's happening on this fight that's happening, whether it be fisticuffs or anything else, how is it, in essence, changing our character? A few pitfalls for you to avoid. 1, do not let fights be meaningless filler. Don't have people just fighting just to fight. Great example of fights that can mean something that seem meaningless but are not. The John Wick series has tons of them. Specifically John Wick 1 though, which expertly shows fighting but having a purpose. The 3 Ninjas is a great example of fights for no fucking reason. Though I did like that movie. I don't care what anyone says. When I was a kid, I did like that movie. I haven't seen it in years. But also, the second pitfall you want to avoid is tying every physical make sure that you're failing to tie every physical conflict to an emotional wound or a goal of some kind. Make sure that every single conflict has a purpose. Otherwise, it doesn't belong there. So, you'll see some of these details as well as a few others in the the Fight for the Soul the Fight for the Soul Storyteller's Guide to Internal Conflict, which is in our show notes. Grab that and enjoy it. Last but not least, guys, we have our lightning round questions where we do not offer explanations. We listen and we do not judge as we ask these questions. First question.
I don't think that's enough for these.
You're going to get so much better at it, I promise. Best fight scene in movie history.
Can I go back to jump in?
Okay.
That fight with
or TV history. You can throw TV in there too if you need to.
I'll stick with jump in. It's got to be the fight between dang it, what was the characters' names? How am I forgetting their characters' names? Izzy and Rodney. The one where Izzy does a backflip and tells Rodney he's not going to fight him anymore.
Gotcha.
I really don't have one. I can't think of one because there's just so honestly many flipping good ones. But first 2 that come to my head, and again, I don't have one, but the first 2 that come to my head is the final martial arts fight at the end of the Cowboy Bebop movie, which has one of my favorite choreography pieces in the fight, and was one of the first scenes I saw of Cowboy Bebop, so I'm really interested in that. But also the Neo versus Agent Smith fight in the first Matrix movie. That whole thing, all the lines there, I'm going to enjoy watching you die, Mr. Anderson. My name is Neo. Oh, the whole thing. It's great. So actually, as much as I love the Bebop fight, you know what? Let's just cut to the chase. I'll just say the ending of the Matrix fight. I don't know.
Okay. I would have to say that I am torn between 2. I would say that the climactic fight at the end of Baby Assassins 1 is freaking so good. But I'm also torn between that and The Villainous, the 2017 South Korean film, which is the opening fight scene in that movie is a one shot that is pretty much in first person the entire, it's pretty much a POV shot the entire time, first person, of just ass whippage that is just unbelievable. I forgot about the rest of the movie. I watched that movie like twice a month just for that one scene because it is so damn good. So I guess I guess I can adopt Charles's perspective and I will just give it to The Villainous because I do think that one is probably the best fight. I don't know if it's the best in history, but it is the best one that I have ever seen, hands down. So yeah, which fictional character would you want in your corner in life, hands down?
There's
Just
too
because
many.
yeah, there's way too many.
Pick
I'm
one
gonna
of them.
okay, I'm gonna go with, does it have to be human? Can I go fantasy?
Nope.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm picking Aslan from Narnia.
That doesn't count. That's God. That doesn't count.
Well, hey.
It's a fictional character. It counts.
So you
I want
so
a
you
godlike
admit it.
lion in my corner. I'm guaranteed to win.
Fair enough.
Even if I'm a little girl with a dagger.
No, Lucy's fine. That makes sense. That's for self-defense. The other one was like, I have a dagger. I can go on this raid. I'm like, you need to
Lucy
get off the
did
front
earn her
lines.
dagger. Lucy earned her
Yeah.
dagger.
Yeah. And I like Lucy more than this character whose name I can't even remember.
That's fair.
Okay, I'm gonna say because the bears have been on my brain. I'm gonna go for Winnie the Pooh because he's one, as I've been saying the past couple years, he's the last motherfracker I respect in this world, or one of the last motherfrackers I respect in this world. So I'm gonna go for that one.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm just go for him.
Okay. I am going to be self-serving in the worst way, and I'm going to say Jaden Swift.
Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry, who?
Is the character I made. So, the main character of my debut
Taylor
novel.
Swift. I heard Taylor Swift.
No.
And I was like, she's a real
Well,
person.
Taylor Swift is kind of a fictional character, but it's...
She kind of is. And I don't mean this meanly. I was watching the Super Bowl. I had it on the background while I was doing work, and there was a thing of her, and she was like this, looking down at the stadium,
So
and
majestic.
it literally looked like she was like, a new dawn is rising, freaking the two towers. It was amazing. She looked like the evil queen in Snow White. It was amazing. I loved it. Like, this is not me criticizing. I thought it was amazing. So I thought that's what you were going for or something.
No, Jaden Swift is hands down the character I would want in my corner because I feel like he's the most loyal but also self-destructive individual that I feel like would just bulldoze everything in my life and make my life a billion times better because of it. So yes, that's it. What is the most overrated sports movie of all time to you? Can I go first?
Yes, please
Yeah.
do. I need
Rudy.
time. Who?
Rudy.
Oh,
Fruity.
there's no explanation. You cannot
It's not
defend
my
yourself.
favorite. Okay, to be fair, I saw that in high school, and it hit me at the right time. And I love Sean Astin, of course. And I like the point. And there's one line in there I really like, but why do you think it's overrated though?
Just hate it. That's really all there is to it.
Chaotic
I really
evil.
hate it.
Okay.
I love the guy that plays Rudy,
Sean Astin.
but I don't like it. Did we just lose Charles? I think we lost Charles.
Oh no, I'm right here.
You pissed him off for the last time.
He just, I know. He's like, I've had it. I'm out of here.
No, I'm right here. Can you hear and see me?
But I can now. I can hear
Okay.
you. Okay, now I can see you.
Ask this question. Is there a movie about golf?
Yeah.
Okay, because
I mean,
if
you better
there
not say
is,
Happy
that is
Gilmore.
my choice.
Say Happy Gilmore. Don't
No,
do
I
it.
was.
I
wouldn't
haven't
say
seen
Happy
any
Gilmore.
of these.
I wouldn't say Happy Gilmore. I enjoy Happy Gilmore, but I do like that movie. My favorite Adam Sandler movie of all time is Billy Madison, and I do like Big Daddy as well. That was also pretty funny.
If your favorite Adam Sandler movie is Billy Madison, why have we not used that famous quote every time we disagree with each other about that answer is wrong and everyone is stupid or stupider for having what you've said? That great monologue. Honestly,
We need that on a paddle you can just raise.
I don't really find a sports movie that's like overrated because most of them I think are just kind of like they're good, but they're just like average. So I can't really think of like a sports movie I've seen where everyone's like, oh, it's the greatest thing in the world. I'm like, I can't really think of anything right now.
Okay. And the last one, this one, Jalen can't participate in, is a story that you feel is dying for a boxing remake.
You know what's funny? I feel like I did have an answer to this, and I cannot think of what it is. It's going to drive me nuts.
To remake Raging Bull, so they can do it correctly.
I honestly, I had something and I lost it. I can't.
That was on the
remember.
record.
If I can choose WWE instead of boxing, I would say Fighting for My Family because I want another movie like that. That was so good. And I want
what?
another one. Fighting for My Family, you need to watch.
I've never seen it.
Okay, how about this? I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. I would think it would be brilliant, and the Marvel Evil Corporation will not ever do this. I think it'd be interesting if they did a small movie on Jack Murdock, Daredevil's father, in the Daredevil story, because that was the first boxer shtick I ever really connected with, and his origin comic is actually pretty good. And I really like the guy they got for him and how they played him in the TV show. So that's there. But if we're going by WWE, I would love for them to make a movie about the Undertaker, and there's a comic book that like talks about the fiction of the Undertaker and Paul Bearer and all that stuff and his brother. Those are my
If we were doing that, I would redo The Wrestler with the Mickey Rourke, The Wrestler, which was a good movie.
See that movie.
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. It was kind of sad, like really sad. Actually, wrestling movie is fantastic. Just for throwing it out there, is the one with Zac Efron, The Iron Claw, and it's about the Von Erich family. And it's, oh my god, the saddest family in the history of wrestling is the Von Erich family. If you don't know anything about wrestling and you don't care about wrestling, I apologize. When you start to think about like story in general, their story is kind of like the most tragic story in the history of wrestling. Like all of them die except for like one, and he's like still alive to this day. He's got like all these kids and stuff. Like it's almost like he was Job in the book of Job, and like his whole family was just like wiped out by like all these tragic moments. And they're not even like killed by outside sources. Like they either killed themselves or they had like disease or whatever, but they all just died. I don't know. But anyway, it's fantastic. Watch The Iron Claw if you can, because I think that's my recommendation for the week. The Iron Claw. Be depressed about it. Watch it. It's fantastic. Zac Efron. It's one of my favorite Zac Efron performances ever, and I enjoyed High School Musical. But this is an actual performance that he like, put it on. And the ending will just make you cry, and I want you to cry. So if I had to cry, you need to cry.
It is really bringing the devil personality.
I am. I fully embrace the roles when I take them on. That's how it is. I'm a method actor. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, what are you guys? I guess before we get out of here, what are you guys' recommendations for the week?
Okay, I didn't have time to watch a lot this week because I've been elbow deep in line edits for My Sister's Keeper, Jared's debut novel, which is coming out so good. But I have been listening to a lot of music. I have Epic, Charles, on my list of what I want to listen to, but I don't want to do it when I'm working because I want to be able to focus on it entirely. So that I know that I'm going to like it once I get to listening to it. But I've been listening to Hadestown on repeat, I've been listening to Hamilton on repeat, and I recently, Book Talk's fault, but also he's an amazing artist. I got into Alex Warren's music, and I actually also got my husband into his music too. So now we both have Alex Warren songs on replay in our house, and it's amazing. If you want like good storytelling using universal human experiences, those songs are a really great example of that.
What about you, Charles?
Well, I have finally seen The Godfather Part 1 and Part 2, which are really great, but everyone knows those. I finally saw the first two Paddington movies, and they're freaking amazing.
I love the Paddington
movies. I also know that people know them, and I can't wait. Hopefully this week I can see the third one, and I'm like super excited. Everyone's like, let's go see Captain America, and I'm like a hardcore Marvel fan. Comics and cartoons and movies and stuff, everything. I'm like, yeah. I'm going to see Paddington. I'm like, I need to see. The recommendation I am going to make, because no one knows about it, is the new Adult Swim show, Common Side Effects, which is really, really good. It's got some Twin Peaks energy sometimes, which is fantastic. Oh, look, I have a Twin Peaks t-shirt on right now. So, but it's really good. The art is really different and interesting. The dialogue is very good. It's very funny. There's some jokes in there that are just genuinely hilarious. Like there's a bit where this lady is working for this pharmaceutical CEO, and he's like, well, you have 30 days of vacation. She goes, no. And he goes to his assistant, he's like, who are you, how many vacation days do you have? She goes, I have 5. He goes, 5? Shit, you should get yourself a lawyer. And it just cracked me up something. But it's just really good and really interesting, and it's an example of great adult animation of today, which is really rare to find. But then the other thing is that it also is proof that despite Warner Brothers actively trying to kill animation and every other company trying to kill animation in the world, this beautiful medium will not stay down, and there will still be great, great stuff. And that Common Side Effects, I think, is an example of that right now. So there you go. That's my official recommendation.
Fantastic. Okay, I have been really, everybody, I told this to Jaylon yesterday that I feel like, I mean, everybody knows how I feel about anime, and that I always try to get into it and then I never can. But what has actually held my attention like so bad that I didn't even do any work yesterday, or like not a lot of as much work as I should have, was Parasite the Maxim, which is an awesome anime. When I tell you about storytelling, bro, this show is fantastic. Fantastic. And it creeps me the fuck out. And I don't even, like, normally I don't get like scared of a lot of things, but like I could not watch this at night. I was like, nope, not doing it.
This is the one with the tentacle stuff, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've never seen it, but I remember when late high school, early college, that was all over Toonami.
Yeah, it is so good.
So I know it really well, but I've been meaning to watch that.
Side note, though, this one is less about story, but more about beautiful moments of humanity that I think that everybody should. I don't think you should go and watch it because I wouldn't subject you to it, but I do think it should be known. The reality TV on Netflix is crazy. Specifically, the TV show Too Hot to Handle. I watched that on Friday night because I was bored out of my mind. And I was like, this has got to be stupid. But there were just two incredibly powerful human emotion moments that happened on that show that were like straight up character development that I was like, what the fuck is this? I've never seen this on a reality show. Like, first there was this dude there was this love triangle between these two dudes and this girl, and the dude, they just met, but he was like, you are in love with her and I want to be a good friend. I'm going to step back and let you have her if she really means that much to you, because, you know, you got to get in touch with your human self and whatever the fuck. And then they did that, and then somehow he stepped aside, and he ended up having like this huge character growth because of that moment. And I was like, the fuck is this? And then the other one was like, there was this heart warrior thing where they all got covered up in mud as men, and then they had to they were like beefing with each other the whole time, all the guys, and then they had covered themselves in mud, and then they had to write down on the list of paper all of the things that they felt were holding themselves back emotionally, and then they had to turn around and show it to each other, and then they were like connecting with each other about like what was holding back, and it was like, I've seen him like I've never seen him before, and then they had to grab spears and like destroy the paper to stop it from holding them back, and they were all like breaking down and crying about the whole thing, and I was like, what the fuck is this? I thought this was about like people trying to abstain from having sex the entire time, and that's all this is about. But it was like real character development happening on this, and I was like, this is like the best reality TV show I've ever seen in my life. So anyway, I'm not saying you should go and watch Too Hot to Handle, but you should probably go watch Too Hot to Handle a little bit, just for a little while, and then, you know, just watch one season, and you'll see what I mean.
Or just take away that you can find positive things in any story.
No.
You can read a gosh dang book.
You could do that. You could definitely do that. But you could also watch Too Hot to Handle on Netflix. So I hope that you do it.
Going on my list.
I'm about to go fire. I'm about to go fire and brimstone. Let's just.
All right, I tried. I'm sorry, Netflix.
I appreciate the story. I love that you told me that story.
But I'm never watching this.
The recommendation part.
Fair enough.
Thank you for telling us the story so that we didn't have to watch it. We all appreciate your sacrifice.
So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode of where we talked about Creed and Too Hot to Handle on Netflix, which you should probably go watch. That's the last time I plug it, I promise. But other than that, guys, thank you for listening. Next week, I don't know what we're watching, so I guess you'll just be as surprised as the team will be when I spring it on them. Just kidding. But that'll be what we do. As far as whether or not your story is hitting the way that you want it to, if your story is not too hot to handle, you can get yourself a free consultation where we will help you to get your story straightened out and in a great place. Also, do not forget to grab your gift in the show notes and learn how to tell better stories through conflict. Thank you for listening, guys, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
See you later.